is the marvel of humanity's worship. There is a longing within each one of our hearts. There is a longing. Listen to what D.H. Lawrence said. We want to delude ourselves that of the problem of our emptiness, love is at the root. I want to say to you, it isn't. Love is only the branches. The root goes beyond love. A naked kind of isolation. An isolated me that does not meet and mingle and never can. It is true what I say. There is a beyond in you and a beyond in me which goes further than love, beyond the scope of stars, just as some stars are beyond the scope of our vision. So our own search goes on beyond the scope of love, and at least I think that it is at the root going beyond love itself. Lawrence, in one of the few occasions that he writes, was very absolutely right here. It is not just love. I have a family that I love dearly. I'd cling to them past anything else that I possess. But there's a point at which you look for something more. You may be completely in love with another human being who fulfills the deepest desires of your heart, except one desire that the human being cannot fulfill. There's always that haunting sense of emptiness that mankind cannot fill. Who put this there? This is an existential struggle. This is why I think the arts will always be so powerful in our existence, because the arts give us the privilege, as it were, of creating another reality, but it just assumes it's another reality. What it is the reality in here. I mentioned to you this afternoon of the call from Elvis Presley's brother. And as we had lunch this week, and he talked to me about the drugs that he was involved in and the drugs that Elvis was involved in. And how he came in the morning, and he and his other brother, and they found Elvis flat on his face with the book of the Shroud of Turin and the Bible under him. And he said, I just was crushed. My whole world collapsed before my eyes. Everything I'd lived for was now literally lying flat on his face, dead. The ambulance was taking Elvis away. The family completely distraught. And in a sense, the world of teenagers began to react that their icon was gone. And he talked about all of these prescription drugs that he'd become addicted to. And I said, what was it that drove that man? He gave me 2 or 3 answers, but he said, Ravi, all I know is with all the women that he had screaming for him and all the fame that he had before him, the man was an extremely lonely man. He said he cried with loneliness. He said the song that I believe he meant more deeply than any other, but a song he could never appropriate as far as we outwardly knew. He said, I saw him stand in Las Vegas before a crowd of gamblers and drinking people, and he says, I want to sing a song to you that deeply moves me. And he sang How Great Thou Art, and he says the audience was in spellbound silence. He said many times when I bid him good night, the last one to leave him every night, he'd be at the piano singing hymns. He said he really hungered for something greater than what the world was giving him. Well, the psalmist says, as the deer pants for the streams of water, so my soul pants after you. How lovely are your dwelling places, O God. My soul longeth, yea, fainteth for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Yea, the swallow has made herself a house, and a sparrow a nesting place where she may lay her young. A place near your altar, a place near your altar, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. Better a day in your presence than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. That hunger that even the blatant secularist has, he cannot explain. It conflicts existentially, and God fills that. That's why the woman at the well, do we worship here, do we worship there, And he says, look, you're an empty woman. You've had 5 husbands. The man you're living with is not your own. I can give you a drink of water so that you'll never thirst again. They that worship must worship me in spirit and in truth. The Father seeketh such to worship him. See, there is not only this contradiction of wickedness with which we don't know how to explain. Secular people do not know how to explain this hunger within the human heart. They struggle with it. Those of you who were with me at the Harvard Forum, the second night when we finished, that Ames courtroom is a beautiful auditorium. The students were lined up in that semicircle. I still remember some of their faces as I was standing there. I was so weary from having lectured for an hour. It's intense. And yet for about 2 hours, you're answering questions. Fresh, young-looking scholars, brilliant scholars, holding my hand with both of theirs, some of them, saying, I really need an answer for this. When I was speaking in Toronto this year at Ontario Bible College doing a lectureship, on the second night, a young Bulgarian man came forward. He said, I heard you Sunday night at the People's Church. He said, I don't go to church, but somebody said there was a person who dealt with philosophical issues, so I came. Can I quote you to him? This is exactly what he says to me. He said, I'm an atheist. Mr. Zacharias, I don't know what it is about what you're saying, but it strikes me deep inside here as something we all need to hear. I don't know what it is. Please keep doing what you're doing. And if you're willing to come to Bulgaria, I will host your meetings. And there's Bible college students standing out there looking in stunned silence at this law student from York University who's telling me to please keep doing whatever I'm doing. He doesn't know what it is, but it sounds right. You know what it is? He's probably saying there's something in here that says only God is big enough to fill this. Let me tell you a beautiful story that I've included in the book I've just written. And every time I thought of it and I wrote it, it just moved me to tears. Only God is big enough to give us such beautiful little stories. I think it is a Billy Graham teammate when I heard this story. I could be wrong, but I know it's a true story. Many years ago, during the Cold War, one of their members was in Romania. And he was walking sort of huddled up, bundled up with his coat tightly clinging to him. It was a blistery day. But one Romanian, amidst the many, one of them was walking by, hands in his pockets and whistling a tune. He wondered how this fellow could whistle in that cold. And then he paused and listened. He was whistling a hymn. The great physician now is here, the sympathizing Jesus. He said, I ran after him. And I looked at him and I said, do you know Christ? And the fellow shrugged his shoulders. He couldn't talk English. He didn't know what to do. And then he decided to whistle the hymn. The fellow's eyes just lit up. His face just beamed. He whistled the melody with him. They hugged one another, pointed towards the heavens, embraced, and touched their hearts and walked on the way. Two worlds were bridged because at this point, even a tune resounded the words of what they knew was real deep in their hearts, the mystery of worship. The world doesn't know how to deal with this. If that's what a stranger can do for you, just the lines of a hymn, and you wrap your arms around a total stranger, what does it do when you learn to worship God himself, who brings the divergent areas of your lives and makes it into a composite whole? It is God and the worship of the living God who brings meaning into your life. Outside of it, all these fanciful things we live for just end up ultimately being burned into rubble. The most precious thing I still experience in my life are the moments where I can walk away, I'm listening to you, Steve. I can just walk away from there knowing that the Lord has spoken to me. I can listen to some of the speakers we've heard and walk away and just know my heart has been touched because a bridge has been created. So first is the mystery of evil. Existentially, the secularist doesn't know